It's been a few weeks, but I finally finished Season 4 of Game of Thrones, so let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your thoughts on Season 4 of Game of Thrones. This is a spoiler review for Season 4 of Game of Thrones, so feel free to spoiler away about Season 4 of Game of Thrones. But since I haven't watched the rest of the show, please be cautious with what you say down below in the comment section. It will be greatly appreciated by me personally. If you're new to my spoiler reviews for the Game of Thrones seasons, you can look down below at the chapter markings. I kick it off with my overall thoughts on the season, and then I kind of break down individual characters and kind of their arcs and talk about as much as I can, as efficiently as I can. One more thing before we get started. This video is brought to you by Audible. You can get a free audiobook of your choice, including one of the Game of Thrones books, by signing up for a free 30-day trial of Audible at audibletrial.com/Sean Chandler. They have all of the Game of Thrones books, as well as hundreds of thousands of other books. If you like to read with your ears, not your eyes, I highly recommend Audible. I listen and use Audible daily, and you can get a free book, one of the Game of Thrones books, at that link down below in the description. And let's get started with my general thoughts. And going into this season, a bunch of you told me this was potentially the best season of the show, where everything paid off. And having seen it, I don't know what you were talking about. Nothing happened, the plot didn't move forward, and the characters weren't remotely interesting. Okay, just kidding. This was by far the best season for me, for the opposite of what I just said. Almost all the criticisms I had of the first 3 seasons actually are resolved here. In certain senses of whether my frustrations with the justice of this world in season 1, where only the bad guys got victories in season 1, or my issues with season 3 and it feeling like everyone was just walking places, but not really progressing the plot. They're just walking somewhere without any clear objective in mind. All of those issues that I had are resolved in season 4, where each of the plot lines, you have a clear idea of what you kind of want to have happen, and it doesn't feel stretched out. If Jon Snow says, I should go rescue those people, the next episode, he goes and rescues those people. If Tyrion is put on trial, there's a couple elements that take place before that, but he's put on trial within a reasonable amount of time, and then the results of that lead to something else happening soon afterwards. Actions have consequences in the immediate future, so you just feel things progressing episode to episode. There wasn't kind of a lull. There wasn't a point in time where I was like, where on earth is this going? So I think of the 4 seasons thus far, this was easily the one that balanced things out the most, that showed the duality of characters the best, and where it had the complexity, it had the long-form storytelling, but it moved things forward in a way that was very satisfying, while also at the same time finding ways to subvert expectations, having hard, difficult things happen to characters that you don't want it to have happen to. There are negative consequences to this cruel world that they're in, but it's balanced on the other side as well, with having victories for our heroes, having people that we found despicable early on, having redemptive arcs. I think it just balanced all the elements of the show the best. And so without question, of the 4 seasons I've watched, this was easily my favorite. And any issues that I've had before were resolved with this season. And based off everything I know from the internet, I'm imagining it's all downhill from here, certainly in the final 2 seasons based off everything I hear on the internet. But I have started to see the parts where it's like the brilliance that everyone has been raving about for all these years. With that said, let's move on to our walkthrough of individual characters and kind of what happens with them. Kicking things off, we'll talk about Jaime Lannister, and as noted in my season 3 review, he's one of these characters that has obviously had one of the biggest character arcs of the entire show, as he starts off as this very shallow, despicable person that is immoral in every way that you can imagine, and through being held captive and the humiliation that came with it and the losing his hand, he's brought down to a level to where suddenly he can connect with other people in a new way. And you very much see that all throughout this season, while at the same time, it's not like they remove a bunch of the dark aspects to his character. You're in, I think it's episode 3, and he literally rapes his sister over his son's dead body, which is about as despicable of a thing as like as shocking, like things that can happen. That's about it right there. But at the same time, his character outside of that act throughout the season, he's the person showing compassion, understanding, trying to balance family members and caring about different people and oaths and loyalty. He's the balanced one. And they use him in a number of ways that kind of show that people do change in this world and can get better in a very interesting sort of way, that he builds this bond with Captain Phasma, and his father gives him this sword that to his father, it means one thing to him, but it means one thing to his father, but when he gets it, it means something so dramatically different to him, that this sword, that it's a big deal his dad gave it to him, made it for him, and then he gives it to someone else because he feels like it should be used for this entirely different purpose. And there's just something very profound in that. And all these people that are loyal to him, he leverages his power to try and help people that are the enemies of other members of his family, just because the other members of his family are not being particularly reasonable in a lot of ways. I think there's something compelling in that you have this guy that's still very far from a good guy, and on so many ways does things that are totally unforgivable. I mean, just despicable acts. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have a good side, and that doesn't mean he's not growing and changing in these other ways. And it's also just like the interactions he has with people, to where, because he doesn't have his hand anymore, people just talk down to him. People that would never have talked down to him suddenly treat him so differently. And you just see him brought down, and it brings the best out of him in so many ways. That's compelling and interesting to me. Then we have Captain Phasma's quest. So she is sent off by Jaime to try and track down and protect these Stark girls, and in fact is given a sword made out of Stark metal, and given Tyrion's squire to help her on the quest, which is amusing because he doesn't really know how to do that. He just wants to be a good squire and is kind of stuck in this bizarre situation, trying to do his best in a non-ideal situation. And so of our stories, they spend a good bit of time traveling and being annoyed, and you see the complexities, kind of this world that they're in, of her trying to be a hero, trying to save the day in a world of characters that don't want her to do that. Even the people she's trying to save don't want to be saved by her. And I actually, at this moment, I'm trying to remember cutting things off properly, because I've watched a little into season 5, and so I'm trying to make sure I don't go too far. And because the stories overlap, don't want to mess things up. But I just think there's something, the way that they built this Jaime Captain Phasma bond is fascinating, because the origin of it is not out of friendship or loyalty or anything like that. She was taking him as a captive. And then through the transformation that each of them happened, there's this interesting bond between the two of them that you wouldn't have expected on the front end of it. And it's not the normal path that these things take, but each of them made the other better and gave the other purpose. So I'll come back to Captain Phasma, because obviously she plays an important role in another one of our arcs. Then we have Arya and the Hound. This is just an interesting one, because they're such an odd couple that don't belong together. They're both pretty belligerent people in their own ways, very different ways, but in their own ways. And he's the worst possible mentor that she could have, and the best at the same time, in light of just the horrific life that she's had for the last 2 years. And so you just have this interesting little dynamic between the two of them that's so much fun to watch, where it's not like she's necessarily the best moral compass at this moment, but she certainly has a better compass than him. And he has such a jaded worldview that there's almost a logic to his crazy. Even in his cruelty, there's a certain logic to it. And on her being trapped in this brutal world where there's no safe place for her to go, that's what she needs. Having grown up under Ned Stark for so many years and then found herself in the wild and with only people out to kill her, largely, having him, the Hound, as this brutal monster of a man coaching her on how to survive, it's fascinating. And him encouraging her to kill people and teaching her how to do it. And having those little moments, those callbacks to episodes before where they have run-ins with people that stole things from her and harmed her friends, where you see her slowly getting her revenge. It's very oddly satisfying to watch this little girl killing people. Normally, you don't want little girls killing people, but in this world, and with how despicable some of these people are, you kind of appreciate it. And in little ways, she softens him a little bit, brings good things out of him in ways that you're not expecting, to where by the last couple of episodes, he actually like cares about her as much as he was just using her in his own way to make money. And on this quest, he realizes like he actually cares about her in another way, leading to the season finale where two people on very different quests crash into one another, and Captain Phasma, who's sent to try and rescue Arya, comes in clash with the Hound, who is kind of watching her, even though he's kind of kidnapped her. And it's this very odd, strange dynamic. And for good reason, neither one of them trust each other. The Hound looks and sees her with a sword that clearly she got from the Lannister family. So there's reason he doesn't trust her. Obvious reasons. She doesn't want him with the Hound. And it comes into the situation of two people that we want to be victorious coming into clash and having those wonderful moments where you don't know what you want to have happen. Or in the other sense, you want them to clash it out and get to a draw, and then they talk it out. That's what you kind of really want to have happen, because you don't want either one of these characters to have a brutal injury from the other person. But at the same time, that's not the world we're in. That's not how this works. And so you have this fight that goes on until you get to the point in time. My eyes have just started to burn while I'm talking. I don't know what's going on here. Live in Texas. We have all this wild stuff in the air, and sometimes my eyes dry out and I start crying at random. Not just because I'm passionate about the Hound and Captain Phasma and Game of Thrones, apparently, but also because my eyes just burn at the moment. So we get to this moment, and essentially, to protect Arya, the Hound goes to battle with someone who's a worthy foe, and though they each have their moments of victory and they're back and forth, eventually he's the one that takes injuries and is kicked down a cliff and gets seriously injured. And you get to this moment it's kind of heartbreaking in a certain sense, because he's finally vulnerable and he's finally being kind of honest, but he doesn't know how to be honest. And so he's just begging her. He's had his moment. He's ready to die. And he wants her to kill him. That's what she's been saying she's going to do all along. And that's the thing that he wants. Therefore, she won't give it to him. And it's just like the perfect, like you want her to do it, to show him mercy in killing him, because they have built this bond. And at the same time, this guy was and is a monster and did horrible things at a different point in time that hurt her and put her on this very dark path. And so the culmination of that journey that she's on, the culmination of the training that he's given her over however long they've been together is, no, I'm not going to show you mercy. You're going to die. And you're going to die a slow death, even though it was a death while you were trying to save me. And so she heads off, and I believe it was at the end of this season that she used the coin that she got from secret assassin guys from season 2 to get onto a boat to travel, and she had to use her coin, and suddenly they would let her do whatever she wanted. But Arya is one of these characters that she's always been a person of action, and so watching her transform from active child that wants to learn a skill set to a very dark character who exists basically to learn how to exact revenge as a little girl is fascinating. and interesting. So I've been enjoying that plotline, and I'm sad to see the dynamic between her and the Hound gone. And he's one of those characters that what's fascinating about the Hound is that he's so distinctly unlikable in every single thing that he does. In every moment that he could do something and get credit in a positive direction, he undermines himself. Has all 4 seasons he did that. But there's this other dynamic to him that's oddly charismatic, that's difficult to pinpoint exactly what it is. And so that's the thing that I think makes his character so fascinating to me, is that weird dynamic of somehow he is charismatic, but I'm not sure why. I'm not sure what exactly it is, how to pinpoint that confidence, but this worldview that he has that he just so sticks to, and unpredictable while also following a set of rules that just makes him fascinating. That'll bring us to Bran Stark, and Bran is still pretty much the most boring character on the show. Just for whatever reason, he's basically just been traveling for a very long time. And there's a couple things that happened here that were fun and interesting, where he gets, kidnapped for a little bit at Craster's place. And then in the middle of that, Jon Snow shows up. And so he had a little bit, some stuff actually happened there. And there's a nice little moment where he escapes and chooses not to see Jon Snow, because Jon Snow would help him, and helping him wouldn't mean letting him finish his quest. But it's a season of him just traveling, and we don't know where it's going, so it's hard to be interested in it. Okay, well, he's going to a tree and he's going to gain some knowledge. Okay, well, I don't know what that means, but okay. And so then, towards the end of the season, he gets to where he's going, and then zombies show up and start killing some of his group of people, and eventually he does make it to where he's going. And so it's okay. I still don't know what this is or what it means, but he made it there. Don't have much to comment on. It was slightly more interesting because it intersected with Jonathan Snow and the guy that was trying to capture him and kill him, the traitor guy that cut off Jaime's hand. He actually arrives at where he's going, but still, it's just him walking for 2.5 seasons. Then we have Theon Greyjoy, or Reek as he's now known, and this plotline is just getting depressing at this point in time. So they ended season 3 with this cliffhanger of his sister loading up with a army of dudes to go rescue him. Midway through the season, they break into a castle to get to him, and basically he refuses to leave. Like, he's so afraid of pain and punishment that he won't go with his sister. And he just goes back into his cage. And it's just heartbreaking. Like, it's one of those moments that you just want the heroic payoff, that he snaps out of it. He's rescued. A family member cares about him. But he's so broken now that even can't happen. He just can't even understand that he's Theon Greyjoy. It's heartbreaking. The sort of thing that if you didn't have some of the other payoff of the season, where it would go too far. Like, if you didn't have other victories happening, other moments that were actually paid off in a positive direction, it would be like, oh, this is just too depressing. But that balance, that's where I think there's balance in the season, that you can have the, she cared enough to rescue him and he's too far gone, so she gave up on him. Oh, that's heartbreaking. But when you have the balance of other things actually moving forward, I think that's where I can be okay with it. Now, once again, that Texas allergies, my nose is driving me crazy at the moment. So this plotline keeps on going, and you get to a point in time where this sadistic keeper, the bastard, decides to use him to infiltrate a base, and convinces him, you're going to go into someone you're not, Theon Greyjoy, to get them to lower their guard. So he goes in playing this Theon Greyjoy character. And the guy that's leading this base that's being under siege, he won't bow down to him. He's like, we don't do that. There's no chance that's happening. And then all the other people that are dying this horrible death because they're under siege, they don't see through it. Like, the leader guy sees, like, this is not right. Whatever this is not the real thing. And they clock him over their head because they want to be able to get out of there, and then open the gates, and the siege is over, and all of them get filleted alive because the Theon Greyjoy has turned into Reek, who is now a weapon of these cruel, cruel people. And it leads to one of the most interesting scenes in the season, where was it Lord Bolton? And the sadistic guy is his bastard son. And they go out, and Lord Bolton, who we hate, goes to his bastard son, who we hate even more. And he lets him know that he will be now known as a Bolton. He's no longer a Snow. He's no longer a bastard. He's actually gets the family name. And it's this moment where it's two characters you despise. They are about as bad as you can get on this show. And it's a show with a lot of really, really bad people. And you almost feel something in that moment of like satisfaction of like, wow, he accomplished something. Once again, I'm almost crying, and it's because my eyes burn, not just because I'm getting emotional about this despicable person. Maybe I should have used some eye drops before I started filming. But it's an odd moment because it somehow, the show is able to humanize the absolute worst people. The act by which he's getting this honor from his father was him torturing a person into insanity and then leveraging that person, abandoning their actual identity to trick people into getting filleted alive. But at the same time, there's something human about a bastard being given his name and being accepted as just a member of the family. It's crazy the way the show can pull off some of those things so well. That'll bring us to the death of a king. And so episode 2, Joffrey has his wedding, and he is in true form the 2 episodes before this, just being the worst. I mean, he's talking down to Jaime Lannister for losing his hand. I mean, he's just being despicable. At his wedding, he is torturing Tyrion just because he can, and trying to embarrass him because he's a sick person. When he's given gifts before the wedding, he intentionally humiliates Tyrion and does what he can to just be as awful as he can be. So we get to the wedding. All of this is going down, and then Tyrion brings him a cup, and the cup apparently is laced with poison, and he chokes and dies. Now, this is one of those ones that I absolutely afterwards remembered it. Afterwards, I was like, oh yeah, I was aware that he died, and I was aware he died at his wedding. But watching through it, I'd completely forgotten. So I was just watching it like, oh, this guy's the worst. And then when he died, I was like, wait, Joffrey's dead? Oh, what? And so it actually did catch me off guard. I did not know that was going to happen. I definitely didn't know Tyrion was going to be on trial for it. All of it caught me off guard. Like I didn't know, which is weird because I like that image of like his dead face there. I was like, oh yeah, like I did know this. Where did I remember that? Where did I forget that? Where did I see that? But some point in time I knew it, and luckily I'd forgotten by the time I actually saw it. So the person we've wanted to have die this whole time finally dies. And Cersei, being a moron and the worst, of course blames Tyrion for it. And so he's arrested, put on trial, even though it's nonsense. Like the whole concept of him doing it doesn't even make any sense, but she hates him and wants him in trouble. Therefore she goes with it. And Daddy is on the one that's going to do the trial. We'll get to all of that later on. But so the thing about it that's interesting is like immediately is the question of who did it. Because the Mandalorian showed up wanting to cause trouble. And then you have all these other factions that, I mean, everybody has a reason to want to kill him off. And you're also wondering, like, did Tywin have something to do with this? As this guy that clearly knows this is a terrible king. This is a terrible person. And he doesn't want to go down this path any further with this idiot on the throne. So you just kind of wonder who could it be? And pretty quickly, it's revealed that there is kind of this conspiracy of several different factions, a lot of them going back to Marjorie's family and them being like, you're not going to marry this guy. We're going to find some other way to make this, but that monster. And in this other sense, you kind of go back to that conversation where Sansa told the matriarch of that family, he's a monster. And in that moment, you were wondering, like, is she in danger for saying this? And you realize that this was a lady that knew he was probably awful, and she's protecting her granddaughter and uses that information, like holds on to it a long time to the right moment with this whole big master plan to make sure that the family gets the connections they need, but without her being married to that horrible human that was Joffrey. Also in the middle of this, because Tyrion was married to Sansa, Sansa is then supposed to be someone that's going to be in trouble for all of this. Part of the master plan was also Littlefinger trying to snatch her off for his own master plan. Which will bring us to Sansa and Littlefinger. So she's swept off on this boat. There's kind of this whole misdirect about the Fool from a couple seasons back that supposedly wanted to honor her with a bracelet, but actually that was a way to get a necklace closer to get the poison to where it needed to be to set up the right people to make everything happen for this big, gigantic master plan. And you turn out all of it was untrue. It's actually kind of an interesting moment of how the show nicely set up a misdirect where you kind of cared about this character. So when you first see him killed, you're like, oh, how could they do this? And then they reveal like, oh, he was all of that was a lie. But the way that you still feel something for this guy, even though every single thing about it wasn't true. The power of storytelling at work. So they end up going off to Mama Stark's sister's place with the creepy lady and a creepy aunt and the creepy cousin, who are also the worst, since most everyone in this world is the worst. They go there, and the whole thing's super uncomfortable because aunt is such a weird lady. Cousin is a psycho and a weirdo. And Littlefinger is manipulating Aunt, and he clearly is into Sansa. And so all of it has uncomfortable written all over the whole thing. And the way it ends up playing out, he marries Aunt, and then very soon afterwards kisses Sansa, and Aunt sees this. Aunt starts freaking out on Sansa, maybe wants to throw her through the ceiling hole. And so, in which case Littlefinger pushes her through the ceiling hole, leading to a moment where Sansa, who, going back to season 1, when she had a situation where she could have told the truth about what was going on to when Joffrey was getting the butcher's boy killed and everything like that, when she could have spoken up at that moment to protect someone, she didn't. She went along with the lie that got someone killed. And in this moment, she makes up a whole story to protect Littlefinger. And in this moment, you realize there's this very strange bond between the two of them. Like she's a trust for him. And you realize in a pretty creepy way, he is very fond of her. But since he's an unbelievably untrustworthy person, you don't even know what to make of that or how far that goes or what it means or what his full intentions are with all of it. But it's wasn't necessarily one of my favorite plot lines, but I still found it interesting. Like, it's one of those ones that, like, every plot line can't be the best. And so this is one I was like, okay, none of these are my favorite characters, but you've created an interesting dynamic here that it didn't linger too long. Like, as soon as they get there, he gets married. As soon as they get married, then there's kisses. As soon as kisses happen, she gets killed. Trial happens. And so it all moved forward very quickly. And also our stories intersecting, right as all this goes down and it's a mess, is when Arya and the Hound show up at this castle to try and sell Arya. And it's right after the lady has died, and so this can't even happen. And had they gotten there, potentially Hound wouldn't have died the next day or two, whenever that went down. But the intersecting stories, I think, is also where this one started to get real fascinating, because so many of the characters that have been trying to get to each other, finally get in proximity and then just barely miss each other. Or they do get in proximity and a misunderstanding leads to conflict that's, frustrating and satisfying all at once. Looping back to the death of a king, we've got Tyrion on trial. And I think this was one of the most just kind of heartbreaking ones, because he kind of reached that peak in season 2 to where he was successful. He was doing something he enjoyed and was actually doing a good job at it. It was bringing the best out of him. He became a more noble person, but he's still hated by his family. And this leads to this kind of decline. Cersei says he did it, therefore they go along with that, even though there's no real evidence that he did it. She's obviously a fool. She's wrong about pretty much everything. Her take on everything is wrong, and she's just a gross, angry person. So he's put on trial. So he has to send off his squire so his squire doesn't get killed. His friends can't really do much for him. And as much as his father is claiming that he's trying to be fair and honest, obviously he's not. And obviously his father's always wanted him dead. And this is an opportunity for that to happen. So it leads to the trial where all of these things that really did happen are totally misconstrued. And Tyrion doesn't really get to present his side of things. He doesn't really get to, like, anytime he tries to, like, put anything in context, he's shut down. And so you're just frustrated watching this obviously unfair trial where the person running it, his father, knows the truth. He knows that Tyrion didn't do this and just doesn't care. He's finding a way to get rid of the son he's always wanted to get rid of. And so Jaime, seeing it's a farce, cuts a whole deal and is willing to sacrifice what the life he's wanted. He's going to finally give into what his father's always wanted for him. He's going to go and have kids and all this stuff that he's avoided actively. He's going to do all of it. Every single little bit of it. He's going to do it. And then in the trial, his father decides to bring out the latest love of his life, Shay, person that he actually did care about, who testifies against him. And the sequence is just horrifying because you know how much he really did care about her. And she's lying. She's openly lying to get him killed, to create a scenario where he will go off somewhere and either be humiliated or die. There's no good options, and she's lying to make it happen because she's angry about how things played out between the two of them, even though he warned her, he tried to have other options. I'm sure if I rewatched it, I'd see another perspective to where the side to which he wronged her. But then in the moment as you're watching it, just she seems pretty awful in the way that she turns on him. Pretty awful. So because of that, he pretty well snaps watching her say all of this and just goes off on his dad, goes off on the room, chews everyone out and says that he wants trial by combat, which he probably won't do well at. And he tries to get his buddy to fight for him, but his buddy's like, hey, I'm getting married. I don't want to die, and I don't think this is a good idea. So he doesn't do it. His sister Cersei picks the Mountain to be the killer person, which, here's where things get interesting. The Mandalorian showed up in town trying to get revenge on the Lannisters for the Lannisters commissioning the Mountain to kill his sister, rape his sister, kill her family. So he's dedicated his life to getting revenge. He's Inigo Montoya from Princess Bride, except like a very hard R version of that story. He's out, like, his whole goal is to get this guy to admit to it and get revenge against Lannisters and the Mountain. Mountain is decided as the person that Tyrion must battle. So the Mandalorian shows up and he says, I will be your champion and I will fight him. And shows up to the fight. And this to me was probably the most horrifying sequence of the whole show for me. Of all 4 seasons, this is the most horrifying, at least through this watch through, because season 1, I'd already seen it. So Ned dying, I knew that was coming. And I knew that even before I watched it the first time. And the Red Wedding, I knew it was coming. I knew bad stuff was going to happen with it. So for me, this was the sequence where it started and I went, I know this isn't going to be a happy ending, but I don't know how it's going to go bad. And I don't know when it's going to go bad. And Pedro Pascal is so good at, like, energetic swagger, confidence, that he's going into this fight like, I'm going to die, but it won't be today, my love. And he's just saying all this stuff and just totally unafraid of everything. And no, this is the day that he finally starts to enact his revenge he's been planning his whole life. Goes into this fight with the Mountain, and he's putting on a whole show the whole time. He's flipping around, and he gets knocked back a couple times, but he keeps outmaneuvering the Mountain. But the whole time his goal isn't just to win the fight. His goal is to get the Mountain to admit what he did and admit the Lannisters told him to do it. So he's working the room, working the crowd, and he's going around slicing the Mountain's legs, kind of slowly making it so the Mountain can't catch up with his agility, to the point in time Mountain goes down, stabs the Mountain in the chest, and there's poison on his weapon, so the Mountain is in very, very, very bad shape. And on the ground. And Mandalorian has a big spear weapon, like that has distance to it. So you have this moment where you're like, I know something bad is going to happen, even though he's won. The guy is on the ground. The guy can barely move. The guy's been stabbed in the chest. I know this season isn't over. I know. Game of Thrones won't just give me a happy ending for two different characters. Guy out for revenge for his sister as well as Tyrion. That's not going to happen. What is going to happen? And he's just walking, spinning around, still with the swagger and confidence, totally not appreciating the danger that he's in. Mountain just knocks his feet out from underneath him, punches him in the mouth, and he just spits all of his teeth out, which it's one of those things that of all the gory things to do in a show, that's not actually that gross of a thing. It's nasty, but it's not that gross. But in this context of this handsome man who's always dressed nice, in love with the men and the ladies, and just could charm anybody, always a big grin on his face, and then he punched in the face, teeth spit out, and then Mountain goes on top of him and starts screaming everything the guy wanted him to say. I killed her, I raped her, all of it, while pushing in his eyeballs. And then I killed her like this. It just squishes it. That to me, like Red Wedding was like, oh man, ooh, I need to take a nap. Like it was a little bit unsettling. I need to watch the next episode to kind of clear my palate after that one. This one actually like haunted me a little bit of like, oh man, like you have those moments where the character died not because he couldn't win the fight, but because of his arrogance. It wasn't a skill problem. It was a character flaw. That arrogance that made him so fun and charming, so carefree, the way he just did whatever he wanted without thinking about the consequences, that you knew eventually would catch up with him. And he wins the fight, but he can't overcome his own arrogance. He can't appreciate this is still a dangerous monster, and dies this horrifying death because of it. And therefore Tyrion loses this trial by combat, is going to be put to death because of it, and kind of leads to a scenario where Jaime decides, I'm not going to let my brother die for this. This is not going to happen. So Jaime frees him and has the whole setup with the eunuch to get him to escape and everything. The eunuch who testified against him, but that doesn't mean he didn't like him, think he had usefulness. He just had to, in that moment, that was the thing he needed to do. Jaime frees him. He goes up to his father's chamber to go and kill his father. And in his father's chamber is Shay, who has been banging his dad and calling his dad my lion, the phrase that she was used for him. And so this wasn't just that she betrayed him to get him killed. She also betrayed him and is with his father. And there's all sorts of other implications of what this could potentially mean of his dad had his lover told him what lies to say to convict him, and just not good stuff. So in rage, he kills her in the bed there, goes and finds his dad, this proud man, on the toilet. And his dad, who thinks he can talk his way out of anything and thinks that Tyrion is weak, and he's always underestimated him. While he has that awareness that this is this child of his that actually probably has his mind, who's closest to his personality and actual skill set is Tyrion. But he still can't appreciate that about it. Like, he can't respect him enough to realize, I just lied. I slept with his woman. I got his woman to lie against him, and I've treated him like garbage for 40 years. He's going to kill me. He can't believe that. So he's just confident this whole time on the toilet, like, he can't believe he will die this way. And he can't control his tongue. He can't even apologize in this moment. And so eventually he says enough things. Or he gets Tyrion says, don't call her a whore. And he calls her a whore one too many times. So he shoots him in the chest, and he's like, you're no son of mine. He's like, yes, I am. And Tywin doesn't understand that even the fact that he is his son is why this is happening, why he's doing this, why he has the strength and why he's going to get revenge. Like, you're not going to treat me like this. I'm a Lannister. You're dead because of it. Kills him on the toilet, takes off into hiding. Then we have Daenerys the Queen. So, at the end of last season, she freed a whole bunch of slaves in a couple of different cities. And this led to the scenario where now she doesn't just have an army, she has a people. So she actually is a ruler now. Not just of conquerors, but of a city, of a region, of an area. And that's what this season basically turns into. She realizes if she wants to go back and rule Westeros, if she wants to sit on that Iron Throne to earn the trust of people, she has to know how to rule. And that's the arc of this season, is her learning that lesson and what that takes, and that it's very difficult and it's not easy, and all of it, everything has consequences. It's just a lot of back and forth of her trying to, like, she wants to make a message about all these people that as she walked into town, they'd crucified slave children to send a message. So she gets into town, she crucifies all the masters that were responsible for that. And then very quickly afterwards realizes some of them really didn't want them that to happen. And therefore, there's a group of people that their parents were killed because of her, even though their parents were the ones saying, don't crucify children, trying to stop it. So she has all this conflict. She has big dragons that are torching people's farms that she keeps letting flying around, and eventually they start torching kids. Not good. So she has all these back and forths as she's trying to figure out how to rule. Meanwhile, word of hers getting back to Tywin, back in King's Landing, and he's paying close attention. Cersei the idiot is like, she's a little girl with a couple dragons. Cersei the moron isn't paying attention. But Tywin, he's paying attention. Like, wait, she's got an army, she has a city, and she has 3 dragons that keep getting bigger. So he starts trying to leverage whatever he can to try and destroy what you can. So this leads us, that came pretty quickly at the end of the season, but he basically just sends word to the former Kingsguard fellow, the other guy in the mix there, that basically informing them of what Friendzone had been doing all those years back. That Friendzone, for all those early seasons where he was very much watching over her, he was also sending words through the eunuch back to King's Landing, letting them know what's going on. But because of that information, that wasn't necessarily meant to put her in danger, it led to them sending someone to poison her and kill her while she was pregnant. Which to her, even though he's the one that stopped her from drinking the poison, he knew what was kind of going on there. It was paying very close, like he never wanted her to get harmed. Because of what he did, it did put her child in danger, and she's not having any of that. So even though he's obviously the person that is most loyal to her, with the longest history, deep concern for her, he is sent off. And as at least I've seen, I think 3 episodes since he was sent off, or 4 episodes since he was sent off, he hasn't come back to like know where that's going, because it seems like certainly he's not done with. Somehow he's going to play back into it. But it's like one of those moments that it's like, you know there has to be consequences. You're glad he's not losing his head because he can come back. And you know he actually, like we know, and she knows that he does care about her. But it's a pretty big betrayal. That's a pretty important thing not to mention to her. Therefore, has to send her off. And you kind of go through all this of, like, you see her as the ruler that's really taking the toll of figuring out how to do this. Like, how to balance all of these different factions, and it's not so like freeing the slaves sounds great, but it's not that simple. There's a lot more to it of like what happens afterwards and all those lessons that she's learning. And that's what part of what makes her character so captivating is she's actually a character that's constantly learning, growing, and trying to be the better version, and doesn't really know what that looks like. And she makes mistakes along the way, but she's trying to be that better person. And finally, we have Jon Snow and the Wall. So I had a lot of issues with Jon Snow's plot in season 3 because he was just walking around the whole season. He got a girlfriend, but he's literally just walking around the whole season. So this season, he gets back to the Wall, and he keeps telling them there's a force coming. There's forces attacking villages, and in the midst of kind of all of this, you see him. He has the respect of a lot of people, and so he's rising up because of that. And the other thing that as I mentioned in my general observations, so much of what made this season work well for me is that it was a season of action, that we would say something, a conflict would come up, and we would have something come of it soon afterwards. So when word comes out that the army's coming, Craster's, they realize that they're in danger, and they say, like, we need to go and take out the men that are at Craster's place because those guys they're going to spill the beans. It doesn't turn into a season of them walking to Craster's place. It's the next episode. And they say we need to do this. They're unwilling. So Jon Snow's like, you can get volunteers. And a bunch of people volunteer to go with him. And so you have that payoff right there that people trust him and want to go with him. Then he goes to that battle and he's victorious. And there's so much payoff in that moment. And then you get to the final, that episode 9, that is just epic battle of a show that always skips all over the place. And we have this episode that's just huge battle for the whole episode. And you really see him rise up to be the person that we've always known he was going to be or could be. That through his lineage, through all of it, he has everything to be the leader of this place, the honor to do it, and the wisdom and the skills. And finally gets to show it through this episode. And, just an amazing episode of payoff. The tension, the buildup, everything's been setting the plot lines to get to this moment. Even the tension amongst the ranks and everything like that. They show up and, the jerk boss guy that's always trying to undermine Jon Snow in this moment doesn't want to undermine him. Like he doesn't want to be successful, but he knows that this guy is a guy that can fight and doesn't want him dead. So it leads to this big gigantic battle where you have giants running to I guess right before it, the big payoff there was that Jon Snow like you have to block off the tunnel. You have to block the tunnel. You have to block the tunnel. And they refuse to do it. And you get to the battle and general guy's like, or the leader guy is like, yeah, we should have done that. We should have done it. You were right. But it's too late for that. Now let's just survive the day. And you got start to even kind of in a little way appreciate the guy a little bit more and understanding where he's coming from and why he feels the way he does. And his little perspectives on it make a little bit more sense. And when comes time for battle, the pettiness goes away for the day. But so giants are storming the wall. Guys are climbing up the wall. And you get all the things that you want from big, gigantic axe things swinging down the wall, just taking guys out, flaming arrows being shot down, giants being shot at, crushed, killed, all different ways, giants making their way into the tunnel, and then the troop that Jon Snow was with in the previous season storming on the other side of the wall, going through the battle. So you get plenty of sword play down there, and the plot just keeps cycling through all this different stuff so it doesn't ever get monotonous. And so through it, there's several different kind of great moments in it. General guy goes down and gets injured, and eventually it leads to the fact that they realize that Jon Snow realizes he has to go down to help. And great moment in there where he goes down and gives his buddy a key, and he's like, the most important thing you can do is get me my dog. And so Jon Snow goes into battle with his wolf. And one of those things that because the dog goes kind of been in the background a little bit, you kind of forget a little bit about that he's there, and then that's part of Jon Snow's tactic. And so then when you go into this fight with all these guys you just want to see them taken out, especially after what they did in those villages, and the cannibalism and everything, and then Jon fighting guys with his wolf having his back. Amazing. And then Jon fights the head of the cannibals, who's much bigger than him and is in most ways able to outdo him. And you're thinking for a little bit is he going to get defeated? And nope, he doesn't. He smashes the guy's head in with a hammer, all leading to a moment where Jon's girlfriend has an arrow pointed at him, could take him out. And then the little boy that the cannibal ate his parents. And Jon said to him, shoot guys, take him out. The person he chooses to shoot, Jon Snow's girlfriend. And you have that little moment where both of them, they're on the wrong sides. It's a Romeo and Juliet story. It's heartbreaking, but you realize, it's kind of what had to happen there. You had to have kind of this moment. And so then, so she dies in his arms. They do just enough to be victorious, and we have a number of casualties down in the tunnel. Some familiar faces die, stopping a giant. But it's only the first day of battle, so Jon Snow decides like he's going to go out and he's going to try and bargain with them, whatever he can do. So he goes out to bargain with them, and in the middle of the bargaining, Stannis shows up. So like we'll loop back to Stannis in just a second, talk about his stuff. But Stannis shows up, the army's defeated, the wall is protected, and you have this moment like where they realize like why is this guy from the wall with these guys over here? Why is he with them? And he's like, I work for them. I was negotiating. And then to Stannis, like the Onion Knight is like, hey, you need to call him sir. He's like, I know my father, Ned Stark, died for his claim of the throne. And it's one of the things you almost forget. Like you forget, like so much of what set this in motion was back that's what Ned Stark was doing. And he was such a small part, in a sense, of what became the plot line in the next 3 seasons of Ned Stark's choice that he made after his friend died and being like, Joffrey is not my friend's son. Therefore, his brother's the proper person that should go to this. So his brother, Ned, died for Stannis' claim. You kind of forget that because Stannis isn't the most relatable guy that you're immediately rooting for amongst all these things that have happened. So in this moment, suddenly Stannis has great respect for Jon Snow and kind of listens to him. He's like, burn the dead bodies, they're going to come back. I think that's where this plot line is for this season. Once again, I've seen a couple more episodes after this because I've watched the first couple episodes of the next season. But finally, I forgot to put Stannis on my list of people to talk about. So on Stannis' front, he was running out of money, and so it goes to the Onion Knight, who comes up with this plan to go to the bank to try and get money. And while they're at the bank, the bank's not even barely listening to them. They're not taking them seriously. They know what's going on with the Lannisters and how fishy it is, but they're the people that are in power. And it's where you start to see, even like at the simplicity of the Onion Knight that couldn't read at the beginning of the show, but he just has like very good street intelligence to read the room, know what's going on, and basically is able to like talk them into giving them the money based purely on the simple fact of like you guys know Tywin is the one wearing the pants, right? You know that's what's going on. Everybody knows that. And he's old. How long do you think he's going to be in charge? And what do you think is going to happen when he's gone? Chaos. Like, he is obviously the person running the kingdom. And he is not old enough to keep this going. And the person that is sitting on the throne is not going to be strong enough by the time he's gone. And because of what the Onion Man does, they actually end up getting the money that they need to have this army that shows up at the end. But it's also interesting because they set that up, and what happens in the last episode? Tywin dies. Tyrion kills him. And so you start to see all of these little things, moving parts, pieces coming together that of how it all plays out. So closing thoughts on the season. As I said before, this is the season that pulled everything together for me. After years of being like, I haven't fully understood where people are coming from. This is the season where I got the most enjoyment, understood best, like the nature of the extended storytelling, the payoff, subversiveness. Horrible things happen, but there's also satisfying moments. There's victory as well as tragedy. This is the season that pulled all of that off, balanced it out the best for me. So easily my favorite of the 4 seasons thus far, as I mentioned before. And I look forward to seeing where things go, and at the same time fear, as I'm well aware, the quality drops in the near future. So I'll see how that goes, how that plays out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you thought down below. Remember, you can get a free audiobook of your choice, one of the Game of Thrones books, at that link down below in the description, audibletrial.com/Sean Chandler, and keep talking movies and TV too much.